Something is deeply wrong inside the Indiana Fever organization, and the people running it are hoping you never find out. Not the kind of wrong that shows up in a box score or gets mentioned in a post-game press conference. The kind of wrong that festers behind closed doors, in hallways, in locker rooms, in private conversations that were never supposed to reach the public. But in 2026, nothing stays hidden forever. The leaks are coming out, the film is being dissected, the insiders are talking, and what's allegedly been uncovered is shaking the entire WNBA to its foundation. Fans have been calling this the single biggest alleged coaching betrayal the league has ever seen. That's not a small claim. That is an enormous, explosive accusation being thrown around by thousands of people who have been watching every single game this season and picking apart every single decision made by the Fever's coaching staff. And when you look at what they're pointing to, what they're breaking down frame by frame, play by play, it becomes very difficult to just dismiss it as noise. Because here's what's being alleged. Caitlin Clark, the most electrifying player the WNBA has ever seen, the woman who single-handedly transformed this league's viewership numbers, merchandise sales, and cultural footprint, is reportedly playing through active, deliberate, institutional resistance from the very coaching staff that is supposed to be building the offense around her. That is what the internet is saying. That is what the viral clips are showing. And that is what several prominent voices in the basketball world are now openly discussing. So today, we are going deep. We are pulling the rumors, breaking down the speculation, examining the alleged locker room revolt, and digging into exactly what NBA legend Michael Thompson revealed in his jaw-dropping viral interview. By the time this is over, you will understand why so many people believe the Indiana Fever front office is desperately trying to keep a lid on something that is already completely boiling over. The Indiana Fever's front office has spent the entire 2026 season trying to sell you a very specific story. The story goes like this. Head coach Stephanie White is a visionary leader running a tight, cohesive unit. The locker room is unified. The players trust the system. And yes, there have been some rough losses, but that's just basketball. Nothing to see here. Move along. They have been pushing that narrative hard, and for a while, a lot of people bought it. The Fever are still in the playoff picture. Clark is still putting up numbers that no rookie has any business putting up. On the surface, if you squint hard enough, things look fine. But the internet doesn't squint. The internet zooms in. And what fans have been finding when they zoom in on this Fever season is deeply troubling, at least according to the speculation that has been spreading like wildfire across basketball forums, social media threads, and YouTube channels with hundreds of thousands of combined views. Rumors are absolutely swirling that the only reason the Fever are surviving this season is because Caitlin Clark is carrying this team through what insiders are allegedly describing as active, premeditated institutional resistance. Not incompetence, not bad luck, resistance. Reports suggest the locker room is fractured in ways that the PR team cannot paper over. And the alleged truth, the version of events that the front office is said to be terrified of, is reportedly spilling out through every crack in the wall. The question is whether the mainstream sports media, which has a long history of protecting organizations over players, is willing to actually cover it. So far, based on what we've seen, many fans believe the answer is no, which is exactly why videos like this one exist. To truly understand what fans are accusing Stephanie White of, you have to go to the tape. Specifically, you have to go to the viral film breakdowns that have been dominating basketball social media for the past few weeks. Because this is not just vibes and emotion. Fans are pointing to specific plays, specific moments, specific decisions made in specific games, and they are making a very detailed, very methodical case.
Here is the core allegation. During critical fourth-quarter stretches in close games, fans claim that Stephanie White is deliberately freezing Caitlin Clark out of the offense. Not accidentally, not because of matchups or defensive adjustments by the opponent, deliberately. They are pointing to consecutive possessions where the ball never touches Clark's hands, where the play calls are slow, methodical, and designed entirely for other players, while the most dangerous playmaker on the floor is essentially standing on the perimeter watching. Now, why would a coach do that? According to the wildest speculation circulating online, the theory is that Stephanie White is trying to prove something. Fans claim she wants to demonstrate that she can win games without leaning on Clark's chaotic, improvisational Logo 3 launching brilliance, that she is the architect of this team's success, not just a passenger riding Clark's coattails. And when that allegedly ego-driven game plan falls apart in the final minutes, fans claim she walks into the post-game press conference and quietly redirects the blame. Which brings us to one of the most talked-about moments of the entire season. During a press conference following a crushing loss to the Las Vegas Aces, Stephanie White stood at the podium and cited her team's turnovers as a primary reason for the defeat. She mentioned 22 turnovers, giving the Aces 18 points. Straightforward enough on the surface, except fans immediately went to the actual stat sheet, and what they found sent social media into an absolute frenzy. The actual number of Fever turnovers in that game was 21, not 22. More importantly, and this is the part that completely broke the internet, the 22 figure that White cited wasn't the Fever's turnovers at all. According to fans dissecting the box score, 22 was the Indiana Fever's own points-off turnovers, meaning the Fever were actually positive in that category. They were getting more out of the opponent's turnovers than the Aces were getting from theirs. So when Stephanie White stood up at that podium and blamed turnovers for the loss, fans claim she was citing a number that, if anything, supported the opposite conclusion. Whether this was a genuine misreading of the stat sheet or something more calculated is something only White herself knows, but the internet made up its mind very quickly. Critics accused her of either not understanding her own team's statistics or deliberately using confusing language to obscure accountability. Neither option looked good, and the clip went viral within hours. Now here is where things reportedly went from bad to completely explosive, because while the press conference was bad enough on its own, what allegedly happened behind closed doors in the hours that followed is what fans are calling the real story. According to wild, unconfirmed insider reports that have been spreading across social media, SOPHIE Cunningham, the veteran enforcer on this Fever roster, completely snapped. Not publicly, not in a way the cameras caught, but reportedly in the kind of direct, behind-closed-doors confrontation that veteran players occasionally have with coaching staffs when they believe something has gone seriously wrong. SOPHIE Cunningham is not a player who makes noise for the sake of making noise. She is a physical, fierce competitor who has earned the respect of every person in that locker room through years of unglamorous, hard-nosed work. She is not someone you expect to find in the middle of organizational drama, which is exactly why, according to the rumors circulating online, her alleged actions carry so much weight.
Internet whispers suggest that Cunningham reportedly walked directly into a meeting with the coaching staff and exposed, in front of multiple witnesses, what she allegedly believes is a deliberate pattern of play calling designed to marginalize Clark in critical moments. According to these unverified reports, she made it crystal clear that you do not pull the ball out of the hands of a generational talent during a momentum-shifting run just to satisfy a coach's need for control. She allegedly pointed to specific plays, specific fourth-quarter possessions, and demanded an explanation for why the most dangerous player on the floor was being systematically bypassed. Rumors suggest she shut down every attempt by the coaching staff to redirect the conversation back toward Clark's defensive lapses or turnover numbers. She reportedly wasn't interested in the spin. She wanted answers about the offensive design. And sources, if they can even be called that, given how unverified all of this is, suggest she did not leave that room until she had said everything she came in to say. Now again, none of this has been confirmed. No recording exists. No official has spoken about it. This is internet speculation at its most intense. But the sheer volume of people claiming to have heard versions of this story from people connected to the organization has kept it alive and growing. And it has fueled an already furious fan base that believes Cunningham did exactly what a true teammate is supposed to do. If the SOPHIE Cunningham rumors were gasoline, what Michael Thompson dropped in his viral interview was the match. Thompson, the former NBA champion and longtime basketball analyst, appeared on a widely shared interview alongside Jason Whitlock and said things about the Indiana Fever that no one in the mainstream sports media had been willing to say out loud. He did not dress it up. He did not hedge aggressively. He laid out what he believes is happening inside the Fever organization with the kind of directness that immediately sent the clip flying across every basketball platform on the internet. Thompson's central claim was straightforward and devastating. He said, based on what he is hearing from contacts around the basketball world, that the Indiana Fever do not want the Caitlin Clark that the world fell in love with at Iowa. They don't want the player who pulled up from the logo on the break. They don't want the player who played with bravado and daring and made the impossible look routine. They want something different, something smaller, something more controllable, a more pedestrian point guard, in his words, whose style fits more neatly into the system Stephanie White wants to run. That single phrase, pedestrian point guard, became one of the most discussed phrases in sports media for days after the interview dropped. But Thompson wasn't finished. He introduced an analogy that has since been repeated thousands of times online. He compared the Fever's roster construction to drafting Magic Johnson and then surrounding him with players from Bobby Knight's system. For anyone who knows basketball history, that comparison lands like a sledgehammer. Magic Johnson's entire game was built on speed, creativity, improvisational playmaking, and the freedom to make decisions in real time. Bobby Knight's system was built on structure, discipline, rigid adherence to the coach's plan, and the complete subordination of individual brilliance to team system. Putting those two things together doesn't just create friction, it destroys both.
Thompson's argument was that the Fever have done something similarly incompatible. They drafted the most instinct-driven, chaotically brilliant player in the league and surrounded her with players trained in a completely different basketball philosophy. And rather than adapting the system to fit the player who is driving every single revenue number the organization cares about, he claims the coaching staff has done the opposite. They have tried to force Clark into a box she was never designed to fit into. And then Thompson said something that stopped a lot of people cold. He suggested that the Fever may actually be trying to maneuver Clark into demanding a trade. Not trading her outright, because the backlash would be catastrophic, but creating conditions inside the organization that become so uncomfortable, so restrictive, so contrary to everything she wants to do on the basketball court, that she eventually asks out herself. That way, in his telling, the organization gets to shrug and say it wasn't their idea. They wanted it to work. Clark and her camp made the decision. Whether that is a fair characterization of what is happening inside the Fever organization or a dramatic overread of normal coaching decisions is genuinely up for debate. But the fact that a figure with Thompson's credibility and connections is saying it publicly is something that cannot simply be waved away. The resentment theory, as fans have started calling it, goes even deeper than play calling and roster construction. According to the speculation that Thompson's interview helped ignite, the alleged hostility toward Clark from the coaching staff is rooted in something more psychological, something that has less to do with basketball and more to do with power, credit, and the uncomfortable reality of what Clark's arrival has meant for everyone around her. Think about it from the coaching staff's perspective, at least according to this theory. Stephanie White has spent her entire career building towards something. She worked for years in the league, earned her way into a head coaching position, and was supposed to be the architect of the Fever's rebuild. And then Caitlin Clark walked through the door, and overnight, none of that mattered to the outside world anymore. Every camera was pointed at Clark. Every article was about Clark. Every record being broken had Clark's name on it. The entire global conversation about women's basketball was suddenly filtered through one player. That is not easy for any coach to absorb, and according to Thompson's viral interview and the avalanche of fan speculation it triggered, the Fever coaching staff never fully absorbed it. Instead, rumors suggest they developed what fans are calling a deep, barely concealed resentment toward Clark's unchecked power and her unprecedented financial impact on the league. They came up in an era where rookies waited their turn, where you earned your place in the offensive hierarchy over years of proving yourself within the system. Clark didn't do that. Clark arrived and immediately became the face of the entire franchise, the league, and arguably one of the most recognizable athletes in American sports. And so, according to this theory, the coaching staff began running what Thompson described as restrictive offensive sets, play calls designed not necessarily to win games in the most efficient way possible, but to limit Clark's freedom, to remind her and the watching world that she operates within a system controlled by a coaching staff that still believes it is in charge. Fans are calling it a desperate, failing attempt to maintain an illusion of authority over someone whose influence has already eclipsed everyone around her.
Thompson's co-host, Jason Whitlock, pushed back slightly on the idea that Clark should speak up more publicly about her situation, suggesting that silence might serve her better than public friction with the coaching staff. Thompson disagreed, arguing that players throughout basketball history, men and women both, have always had the right to speak up when they feel they are being mistreated or not getting fair calls. He was emphatic that he sees nothing wrong with Clark being vocal about what she is experiencing on the floor. What the two hosts did agree on was that the coaching staff, and Stephanie White specifically, needed to do more to protect their superstar. Thompson pointed to situations where Clark was being grabbed and clutched without fouls being called, and argued that a head coach is supposed to stand up for her players in those moments. Take a technical if necessary. Make it clear to the officials that your star player is not going to be manhandled without consequences. And in his view, that protection has been conspicuously absent. Now, in the interest of being complete here, not everything said in Thompson's interview was a full-throated defense of Clark, because one of the more interesting moments came when the conversation turned to her defense. Whitlock made the argument that the Fever's original decision to switch their defenders 1 through 5, meaning Clark was regularly being asked to guard players who were significantly bigger and more physically dominant than her, seemed almost intentional in how poorly it exposed her. He framed it as the coaching staff setting her up to look bad defensively, so that her defensive struggles would become a talking point that overshadowed her offensive brilliance. Thompson partly agreed with that framing. He pointed out that any 6-foot guard in professional basketball, male or female, is going to be destroyed in a scheme that asks them to switch onto every player on the floor, regardless of size. That is not a Caitlin Clark problem. That is a scheme problem. And if the coaching staff designed that scheme knowing it would expose their star player, then that is a serious question worth asking. But here's where it got interesting. Thompson did not give Clark a total pass on defense. He pushed back on the idea that her defensive struggles are entirely the coaching staff's fault. He was direct about it. He said she gets beat off the dribble too easily. She reaches and picks up foolish fouls. She loses focus on that end of the floor in ways that a franchise player cannot afford. And he made the point that the same obsessive work ethic Clark applies to her shooting and her offensive craft needs to be applied to her defense as well. Because right now, according to Thompson, that side of the ball is genuinely a weakness, and no amount of bad scheme design changes the individual responsibility a player has to compete on both ends. It was a rare moment of balance in a conversation that had otherwise been fairly one-sided in Clark's favor, and it is worth noting because it keeps the picture honest. The argument being made by Thompson, by fans, by the viral film breakdowns is not that Caitlin Clark is flawless. The argument is that a flawed but transcendent player is allegedly being mismanaged, underprotected, and possibly deliberately constrained by a coaching staff that is more focused on institutional control than on winning basketball games the right way. Those are very different arguments, and conflating them is exactly what, according to fans, the Indiana Fever's PR machine wants you to do.
So where does all of this leave us right now? The Indiana Fever is still playing. Caitlin Clark is still on the court. Stephanie White is still the head coach. On paper, the organization is functioning. But underneath that surface, if even a fraction of what is being rumored and reported and broken down and speculated about is true, something is seriously broken inside this franchise. The fans are not moving on. The viral clips are not disappearing. The insider reports, unverified as they are, keep coming. Sophie Cunningham's alleged confrontation with the coaching staff has become a rallying point for everyone who believes that the locker room's best players are no longer willing to quietly accept a system they believe is actively working against them. Michael Thompson's interview has become a reference point that gets cited every single time another questionable late-game decision gets made. And Caitlin Clark keeps playing, through it all. Through the alleged freeze-outs, through the defensive scheme exposure, through the post-game press conferences where statistics get misread and blame gets carefully redirected, she keeps showing up, and she keeps performing at a level that makes every attempt to diminish her look smaller and more desperate by comparison. What this situation ultimately reveals is something much bigger than one team's internal drama. It is a stress test for the entire structure of the WNBA. For the first time in the league's history, a player has arrived with so much commercial power, so much cultural weight, so much undeniable public demand, that the traditional hierarchy of coaches and front offices and patient institutional development cannot simply absorb her on its own terms. The system has to change. The question is whether the people running the Indiana Fever are capable of changing with it. Because if the rumors are true, and it is critical to remember that rumors are rumors until they are proven otherwise, the cost of not changing is not just a few bad losses, it is the potential waste of the most significant talent the women's game has ever produced. And that is a story that the basketball world will not forgive easily. The reckoning, as fans keep saying, is already here. The only thing left to find out is exactly who it catches when it finally lands.